Sickening, disheartening, callous. This is the tragic story of Holly Rowe. It will make you angry, it will make you cry, but we owe it to Holly to know her story. On the 10th of September 2018, Holly, who was only 8 weeks old, died as a result of a severe head injury. This was caused by shaking or catastrophic traumatic impact inflicted by her father, Michael Rowe. Tiffany Tate was the mother of Holly. Michael himself was 30 years old at the time of Holly's birth, and he was 31 at the time of her death. He had a son named Riley from his previous relationship, of whom he had sole custody. His son was 4 years old at the time of Holly's death and lived with Michael, Tiffany, and Holly at their home in Crowborough in the United Kingdom. As for Michael's life itself, he had no previous convictions or other trouble or involvement with the police apart from one count for possession of cannabis. He did, however, admit to lying under oath in a family court proceeding in May 2019, but his upbringing isn't one of envy. His troubled family background, the years he spent in care, having passed through 14 foster homes over the course of 7 years, as well as the physical abuse that he suffered at the hands of his alcoholic father as a young child before he was taken into care. At the time, he was so badly abused that he had to be hospitalized. As a child, he was assessed as having a mixed emotional and behavioral disorder as well as learning difficulties. He claimed to have struggled with anxiety and depression and suffered from learning disabilities and difficulties with reasoning skills. Many of you may sympathize with him, perhaps as I tell you more of this story, but keep in mind that many others have suffered similar difficulties in their early life without having gone on to commit murder, much less to murder a child. He also suffered from a medical condition, ankylosing spondylitis. And I know I've butchered that name. I have no idea what it is. Why don't you guys comment and tell me? It is said it's a very painful condition from which he had suffered from some years and which is apparently incurable. As for Tiffany Tate, she was 19 years old at the time of Holly's birth. She was 20 years old at the time of her death, and Holly was her first and only child. Holly was born on the 14th of July 2018, 2 months premature by emergency cesarean section and had to be resuscitated. Her expected due date was September. Although Holly had the health difficulties one would expect of a baby born 2 months premature, she made very good progress in hospital, and after 19 days in August, Holly came home. She was a very healthy baby. A month later, sometime around midnight, 10th of September, Holly was dead. The undisputed medical evidence in this case showed that Holly died of a non-accidental head injury caused by an incident of forceful shaking, traumatic impact, or both, and that she would have been unconscious, if not dead, from the time of that injury. The pathology evidence showed extensive bleeding in various areas in and around her brain, spinal cord and eyes, bruises and tears both in the outer areas of and deep within her brain, and multiple rib fractures front and back. The evidence also shows that in addition to the event that took her life, she had suffered similar injuries produced by forceful shaking or traumatic impact, plus rib fractures from her rib cage being squeezed by large adult hands on at least one other and probably more than one other occasion. Now, before I continue, Michael's hairline is so bad I can see what he's thinking. So for this video, I have teamed up with MD Hair. They are the world's first medical grade hair growth treatment. Now, I'm going to run you through all the products, but this is the customized hair shampoo. So when you're taking a shower, you just put it on your head, you rub it in, and you wash it off. It's been very easy to use and it smells great. Let me show you the other products. You get the conditioner. You also get a wellness supplement. You also get a hair care serum, which you apply a drop onto your scalp. And finally, a collagen beverage. You just put a scoop into some water. Again, like the pills, you take once a day. And I've got some exciting news for you because MD Hair is dropping an epic Black Friday sale by using my promo code TrueRed70 to get your first month of customized products at 70% off. So go to mdhair.co, use the code TrueRed70, Link is in the description. There was a time, perhaps a week, possibly two, before Holly's death, when Michael was alone with Holly downstairs giving her a nighttime feed. Tiffany was awakened by Holly screaming. She heard 3 loud bangs downstairs. Tiffany Tate came down to find Holly extremely distressed and, in her words, proper screaming. Michael told her to go back upstairs. The next day, Michael told Tiffany that he had been feeding Holly milk with a syringe through her nose because she was not taking her bottle. He also told Tiffany not to mention this incident to anyone. The timing of this incident was consistent with the medical evidence that Holly had suffered non-accidental injuries, consistent with forceful shaking or traumatic impact a few days or weeks before her death. On the evening of the 4th of September, Holly had been alone with Michael while he gave Holly her 6 p.m. feed. Tiffany had gone to the fish and chip shop to get dinner. She arrived home just in time to hear Holly barking like a seal, suddenly going floppy and stop breathing, while Michael immediately commencing mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. Michael claimed that she did stop breathing on that occasion and was merely choking on saliva. Despite the seriousness of this incident, neither of them sought medical attention for Holly on that occasion. Michael told Tiffany not to tell anyone because it was not that important. Muppet. Tiffany knew that Michael had told her to tell no one because he had done something wrong. She knew that something bad had happened to Holly and that she needed medical attention. And the question remained, why did Tiffany not act? She did not mention this event to her mother, nor say anything to the health visitor, or take Holly to the hospital, or simply take Holly away to stay somewhere safe. Tiffany told the court that from the 4th of September onwards, she knew her baby daughter was ill and in pain. She was often cold, pale, floppy. The court learned that Holly had suffered very painful rib fractures and that Tiffany saw her pained reaction to being picked up and how she cried. That is bollocks. I told you guys recently my son, he fractured his arm. I knew straight away from the look on his face something was wrong. We took him to the hospital and now he's okay. How did this silly cow just ignore her baby's pains is beyond me. I don't mean ignore literally, I mean why don't you take her to the hospital, you idiot? In the trial, she could have admitted that she knew the situation was serious, that she should have done something, and that she did not take any effective steps to help Holly. But she didn't because she did not want Michael to throw her out of his house. During the trial, Michael tried to pin the blame on Tiffany even before Holly's death, when he said a number of things to the health visitor on the Friday before Holly's death that were clearly intended to create suspicion, and when he spoke to Tiffany's close friend Samantha 2 days after Holly's death, saying things to her that were also clearly intended to create suspicion that Tiffany had harmed Holly. This shameful behavior by Michael considerably enhanced his culpability. Moreover, the fact that it began before Holly's death shows that he knew he had seriously harmed Holly even before he finally took her life on September the 10th. The judge believed to the criminal standard that at or around midnight in September, when he carried Holly upstairs to her Moses basket, she was either already dead or in a coma, dying shortly afterwards. The judge also believed that Michael's original account to the police is true, that he simply went to bed at that point. Basically, he knew she was in severe pain, he just left her there and had a kip. Michael hoped, perhaps assumed, that Holly would recover from the shaking he had given her as he had previously. The judge said Michael's story about him having gone downstairs again after putting Holly in her Moses basket in order to have a smoke in the shed was another obvious and embarrassing lie, made up after he had heard the prosecution evidence at the first trial in March 2020 and clearly intended to divert suspicion to Tiffany. Michael himself was the last person to have seen Holly alive when he gave her her last feed. He pretended to the court that in contrast to Tiffany, he was a calm and experienced parent, having been a single parent to Riley. The evidence during the trial showed that while he was apparently a good father to Riley, he was no more patient than Tiffany when he had difficulties feeding Holly, and that he would get frustrated, lose his temper, and lash out. Unfortunately for baby Holly, his lashing out proved fatal. Both Michael and Tiffany each admitted telling lies on prior occasions, but Michael admitted to his lies as his were much more serious and more numerous, included lying under oath during family court. In addition, it was clear Michael told lie after lie during the trial in the Crown Court, changing and adding to his accounts of various incidents, but in particular regarding the events of the 10th of September with a view to cast suspicion on Tiffany. But his lies were clumsy and obvious, and the jury had no difficulty seeing through them. The judge told him, having heard a great deal of evidence about his family background, including the time that each of them spent in care as children, because both of them were abused as children, both Tiffany and Michael, the judge decided that he would not be assisted for the purposes of sentencing by any additional reports about either of the suspects. In Michael's case, the judge had considered the psychological report prepared by Dr. Celeste Van Rooyen in relation to him from August 2013, which, to the judge, confirmed all the child abuse. But it was also revealed that Michael, the dirty bastard, had a sex toy shed. When the police searched his house, they asked him about the items in the shed. He said they are male sex toys. When asked the name of the items, Michael said, "It's called a sleeve." Eh? The other one is the lower part of the female body. They were old sex toys I wasn't using. Michael said he kept the items in a bag along with a tube of KY jelly. They belong to me, he said. I use them. As I said, dirty bastard. The judge told Michael in this case, under the relevant legislation, the starting point for the minimum term for his crime is 15 years. But there were a number of aggravating factors. The first is the extreme vulnerability of his victim, a premature baby who at the time of her death had only just reached the normal gestation period for a full-term baby. There was also the physical suffering that he inflicted on Holly on at least one other occasion and probably two, if not more, occasions. Holly was clearly suffering from the time she stopped breathing on the 4th of September until she died. Having been observed to be in pain, more sick than usual, cold floppy, her eyes rolling. In evidence, the jury heard that at her 6-week checkup with the GP, Holly showed that she could fix and follow with her eyes. One of the doctors who testified, Dr. Cleghorn, said eye rolling after that point was an indicator that Holly was seriously unwell. And on a side note, as you people know, I've mentioned, we just had a daughter, right? My daughter was born maybe a month ago. She's 4 weeks old now. How could you ever get angry at an infant? An infant is so helpless. You can't help but be gentle with them and hold them accordingly, feed them, etc. How could they ever annoy you to this point? What the hell? The judge went on to say, knowing what he did to his daughter, he told lie after lie to avoid responsibility and the consequences of what he had done. The judge sentenced him on the basis that he intended to cause Holly really serious harm rather than his intention to take her life, and that his assault on Holly, ending in her death, was not premeditated. Before I get to his actual sentencing, let's go back to Tiffany. She was described as having borderline learning difficulties. She had a history of having been taken into care as a young child, and the sexual abuse she suffered at different stages of her life at the hands of her half-brothers and her half-stepfather. Tiffany was seen to have been open and cooperative from the time of the police investigation to giving of evidence at trial. She admitted a couple of lies of comparatively minor significance. She did say, during the trial, that she had some issues with depression after the birth of Holly, which is not unusual for a young mother. In her version of events, she told police that Michael had been looking after Holly. She came home at 6 p.m. Holly was making a weird noise. She was told Holly was sick all over the floor and was barking like a seal. She went on to say, Michael said it's nothing. She's probably got trapped wind. He laid her down on her back and she stopped breathing. He done the mouth and nose thing and she was fine after that. I was there when she made that funny noise. He checked and done the mouth and nose thing and she was fine. Since that day, she's been a bit whingy and a bit cryy and a bit scared to bring up her wind. He only did the mouth and nose thing and she started breathing. He thought she was choking on her own sick. I called my mom and said Holly was barking like a seal. She went on to say that she described their relationship as complicated. She was worried that social services would take her baby away, or that Michael would throw her out of the house if anybody found out their baby had stopped breathing. Tiffany said, I called my friend and told her I said to Mike I hadn't because I didn't want him to chuck me out. The jury also heard that Tiffany was worried Michael would have custody of their baby if they separated. Tiffany's support worker, Sarah Beale, told the court Michael said if she left, she wouldn't be allowed to go to the funeral. She said they had an argument and he said if she moved away, she wouldn't be allowed to go to the funeral. She took it seriously and she was upset. The young mother admitted she considered acting violently against her baby in a police interview. I just said, "Why are you crying? What am I doing wrong? Sometimes I want to throw you across the wall, but I love you too much to do that." I was struggling. I said to her, "What am I doing wrong? I'm doing the best I can. You need to help me out." Because she's a baby, she can't really help me out. Tiffany also reached out to her former partner for help. "I thought he was setting me up to fail," she said. Now, in terms of the sentencing, this is exactly what the judge said. In relation to her sentencing, the judge had to regard the sentencing council guideline for the offense. He said, bearing in mind that she was being sentenced on the basis that she allowed rather than caused Holly's death. In the judge's view, her culpability falls into the medium category. Although the syringe feeding incident was itself not an incident of the type that resulted in Holly's death, and it cannot be said to the criminal standard that she observed Michael shaking Holly on that occasion or any other occasion. Tiffany nonetheless knew from that time that Michael was potentially dangerous to Holly. The judge believed had she not allowed the abuse, the baby would not have been murdered. There were no aggravating factors for the judge to consider in relation to her offense. The judge told her, "I bear in mind that you have no previous criminal record. It is submitted on your behalf that although you have difficulty displaying emotion, you have demonstrated remorse by your acknowledgement during the trial that you should have done something to protect Holly. I accept that. I am also asked on your behalf to accept that due to Michael's lies, you have been tried for murder, but that charge of murder was dropped. I bear these matters in mind. I note that these proceedings have lasted for more than 2.5 years and that throughout that time you abided by your bail conditions with no breaches. In relation to each of you, Michael and Tiffany, there is a statutory surcharge that applies and that must be paid. Michael, for the murder of Holly, I sentence you to imprisonment for life. The lowest minimum term that I can impose commensurate with the seriousness of this murder before you can be considered for release is 19 years. It is important to emphasize so that you and the public can understand the position that the minimum term is just that, a minimum period that cannot be reduced in any way. After you have served that minimum term, there is no guarantee that you will be released at that time or at any time after that. It is only if the parole board decides that you are fit to be released that you will be released. In any event, if you are ever released on license, you will still be subject to this life sentence and to specific license conditions. If you breach any condition, you will be liable to be returned to prison to continue to serve this sentence. So Michael was sentenced to life with a minimum term of 19 years. Let's move on to Tiffany. The judge said, "Tiffany Tate, for allowing the death of your baby daughter, Holly, the least possible sentence that I can impose, having regard to the seriousness of the offense, is one of 2 years and 9 months in prison. You will serve up to 1/2 of your sentence in custody before you are released on license. You must keep to the terms of your license and commit no further offense, or you will be liable to be recalled, and you may then serve the rest of your sentence in custody." There's no excuse for what happened, but I do think there's a theory. Given Michael's childhood, he probably only knew how to cope with anger by lashing out, right? There's no excuse. There's plenty of other people who have had similar trauma who haven't committed murder. But I'm saying in his brain, the moment Holly pissed him off, he just lashed out. And I do think the way he was raised probably played a part in this, as a coping mechanism. He did not know how to respond in any other way. Maybe. But that doesn't change the fact that he's a callous, sickening, disheartening bastard. I don't think 19 years is enough, or at least he should never be released. As for Tiffany's sentence, she said she didn't say anything because she wanted to stay in the house. She did not want to separate, or she feared Michael would take the child away. Well, what she should have done is taken the child away herself and kept the child safe. But she failed to do so because of her own selfish desires. 2 years? To be honest with you, I don't even know what her punishment should be. So why don't you comment? Why don't you tell me? Thank you for watching.